Good morning. Thank you all very much for joining us. This is a opportunity for all of us to learn from some real experts that can help look around the corner and see what the future does hold. I really appreciate your joining us here. Our panel is it's a fireside chat, so we're all just going to chat amongst ourselves. It's external and internal factors that are driving the mobility transformation, which really means that we're going to talk about how for each of our business units, these changes are going to impact not only what we do, but what others downstream from us should be thinking about. That's what's so good about this. So I really appreciate it. The idea of this summit was something that was started a number of years ago. Catherine, the founder of Work Trucks, is a commercial truck guru. She understands the business better than anybody else. She's been a serial entrepreneur and wanted to find a way to communicate to the industry like maybe a little bit like sitting around a potbelly stove or a town hall meeting and talking about things that are going to happen in the future so we can all share it with each other and have a better understanding. With the change that's going on, we all know these changes are occurring. It's a period of uncertainty, but the winner is going to be those that can identify the trends the soonest and move their strategy to be in the right place at the right time. And that's why this forum, this summit, provides its maybe a little bit like a continuing introduction. The panel is experts in a number of very interesting positions in this chain. I'm the moderator, so that means I'm here to learn and listen. I have had an opportunity to work for a couple of OEs. I worked at Toyota for 40 years as the president of North America, and then I got to be the president of Chrysler and spent the last 10 years in retail. So what am I doing here? In the retail business, I always wondered about the commercial side of the business because it's business to business and it's consistent. And some of our dealerships were using Work Truck Solutions products, which of course I didn't know about. I had to question it when it came to budget time. The more I learned, the more I became interested. I met Catherine and I became, for all transparency, I became an advisor to the company. But I'm learning about this business. And the reason is not only is it the right kind of business for the future, I think it's a model for mobility going forward. And that the professional relationships that you drive and the kind of decisions you make will be driving much of the industry in the future. Our panel, though, what we've got is we've got users and we've got the beginning of the chain and those that are going to be adapting to the chain. Mandar Dighe is he's the global sales, marketing, and business development executive at Knapheide. Knapheide is used to make wagons back in the 1800s. Has been in the upfit industry since the beginning. Created it. Is the leading upfit company, and Mandar is a wonderful strategic thinker who does see the future. And I think that he can help us kind of translate what we're going to learn from the OEs, how to make this whole chain work. Dave Herring is with us, Mitsubishi HC Capital America. He's a vice president, general manager, Work Truck Finance. Mandar's company is old. Dave's may win. They were founded in 1646.
That's really old.
That's really old, yeah. Actually, it was before my time, so you know, I kind of like that. But it's one of the great Japanese trading companies. But last year, Mitsubishi and Hitachi formed a group together called HC Capital, and so Mandar is going to worry with adapting the commercial product to the customer, and of course, Dave is going to be focused on how you finance it, lease it, how they own it. It's more than just loaning money. Their business is really providing the ability to finance or to own. Tony Stinsa is with us. He's a repeat. He's the vice president used trucks at Navistar. Navistar is one of the older companies that has continued to make commercial vehicles. They're a great heritage organization and have recently, I guess last year, became part of the Volkswagen group of a global consortium of commercial vehicles, and they are 6 through 8. And they're also, they've been providing us great counsel on what it looks like. And Tony, from the used car operation, as you know, used vehicles drive the new vehicle business. And we're always the best used vehicles are the best new vehicles. And we have a newcomer, Dighe Shust. Dighe is the vice president, medium duty truck business for Navistar. And that's a big job right now because she's making all the bets on what's going to be in the next 5 or 6 years. And it's not easy. Even, I just tell you right now, Toyota, who's not made the right bets on EVs, just last week announced a complete redrawing of their EV plans. A new organization, they've thrown out the platforms and they've started to invest in all new platforms today. And so this is not an easy position to be in. Dighe has a long-term, I think 30 some years, must have started from grade school with Navistar, but it's wonderful to see women in the industry. And then on the other side of the spectrum is Sydney Dunn, who's vice president of sales for Trucks USA for Lion Electric. Lion is the leading electric manufacturer. They've been making electric trucks, buses since 2008, and is the leading manufacturer of EV school buses. 6 through 8 is a segment that they're entering. And so we've got sort of 2 ends of the spectrum here. A legacy manufacturer that's moving from ICs in with a traditional dealer body into commercial, whatever the future is going to be with different technology. And then a newcomer who's didn't have the tail, but is starting in the EV business. So we want to start with the OEs and the perspective of how they see what the future holds. And then that will drive what Mandar and Dave will be talking about and how they adapt. But the whole idea here is for us to try and understand now what do we do for each of you, help you see around the corner. So with that, why don't we start with the idea from the OEs, and Debbie, maybe you're in the best position, is where are you? What kind of factors are you contemplating? And strategically, what kind of decisions are you making right now as you assess the entry of this new technology in Navistar trucks?
I think probably the biggest change from where we were maybe 5 or 6 years ago is realizing the speed of change that's happening. I will tell you, I was probably pessimistic 5 years ago, and I am completely drinking the Kool-Aid and knowing that we need to move forward with exponential change. I think that's how fast we're going to see this industry adapt and adopt electric vehicles. So that's probably the biggest change. I think I've mentioned to you earlier that one of our biggest hurdles that we see is that we're really good at truck. That's, we've done this for a long time. We've been in this business for over 100 years. We know how customers use vehicles, but the complication with electric is the ecosystem that goes with it, and charging and infrastructure, and making sure your customers understand that this is not a direct replacement today for a diesel product. So that's added to the complication and some of the learnings that we've had over the past 2 or 3 years as we've migrated more and more to zero emission vehicles.
Do you have a sort of a rough idea from your perspective, and no secrets from the company, of the timing? There's this issue because a lot of this EV transition is driven by the government, society, versus consumers. So given that reality, how do you assess the timing it's going to take? Is it going to be adapted faster than we think? Or will regulations be the hammer that actually forces people into changing their cars to EV or trucks to EVs?
So I actually think it'll be a combination of all of those. So obviously California, and there's 17 other states plus the District of Columbia that have signed memorandums of understanding that they intend to follow California's regulations. Those states represent 30% of all registrations in the US and Canada, or in the US today. So it's significant if they adopt. That will be a forced march from a regulatory standpoint. You've watched corporations declare that they intend to be carbon neutral by certain dates. I guarantee you that most of them don't have any idea how they're going to get there. And now they're turning to those of us in the industry that can help them to figure it out. And then we do believe that, just like computers, the cost of batteries and all of this componentry is going to come down. So today there's without incentives, not a TCO, equality with diesel. But we do believe that somewhere in that 2026 to 2028 timeframe that we'll be at parity. And all of a sudden this becomes a much easier conversation because there's a business case to move to electric vehicles.
Interesting. But Sydney, how do you, you're looking at it from a different perspective, as opposed to transitioning, you're looking at your company becoming what the potential is. How do you see the issues surrounding your growth and success? And the same question about timing from your perspective.
Yeah, so I think Debbie hit the nail on the head when she said that the ecosystem is so important in terms of fostering electrification. As you mentioned, Lion has been in the EV industry building school buses since 2008. So we do have the benchmarking for the last 10 years in terms of being electric, having vehicles on the road, and understanding the challenges to adoption. One of our biggest pieces that I think is important within the Lion organization is our ecosystem. So we've spent a lot of time and effort as an EV manufacturer to really develop an internal ecosystem that addresses customers' concerns or questions regarding charging infrastructure, regarding telematics, regarding grants, regarding financing and capital. So we have internal teams that work with our sales team and customers to help frame everything up for them so that those hurdles to overcome the EV adoption are much less. And I think that will be the key to success. I think that most OEMs are going to have to change their business model and move from not just thinking about product when they're selling, but thinking about all of the other ancillary services that go into it for EV adoption.
The mobility factor. So since 2008, have you seen customers move their fleets partially into EV and then expand EV within the fleet? Or are you also adding a lot more customers that are moving from IC to EV?
So we've seen both, right? Obviously, regulatory needs and pushes are driving a lot of customers, especially in the government space and municipality space, to move EV. But the grants that are out there currently in certain key markets, like Debbie mentioned, California, the state of Illinois is getting ready to come out with some huge EV incentives. Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, that is certainly pushing a lot of customers to look at electric and to move that way. But a lot of customers are, transitioning from traditional ICE vehicles in their fleet to electric. And because of that, that's why the infrastructure piece is so important now more than ever. It is changing their business model, right? Like we are asking customers now, fleet customers, to really think about and change their purchase behavior. The way that they historically have purchased is smaller net acquisition costs, but then those costs would be spread over the course of the life of the vehicle, maintenance, that sort of thing. the value proposition has shifted a little bit with electric. These vehicles are much more expensive up front. It's much more expensive for them to include the infrastructure and every piece that needs to go with it. But long term, the advantages are there.
This is great. I really appreciate your sharing. What kind, do you have any data on the maintenance cost difference? So at what point in time of ownership do those lines begin to intersect? How much less is maintenance?
Yeah, so in terms of our products, we are seeing that our maintenance costs are roughly about 40% lower than traditional ICE vehicles. But where we see right now with the high upfront costs as they are, we're seeing the shift in that ROI for our fleet customers right around that 5.5 to 6 year mark, where that is the turning point for the fleets, where it starts becoming more economic for them to go electric versus ICE.
That's really fascinating. And so you've also got used buses you're selling?
We do.
How have the residuals been?
The residual market is an interesting one as it relates to EVs in general. And in this discussion, we're seeing about a 25% or so residual value on those. But I think as more data comes out, we get more vehicles in the marketplace, those numbers will change. And especially as an industry, we start looking at the battery components, right? I think we need to rethink our business models, the way that we look at the components in an EV compared to an ICE vehicle. The batteries have a lot more value and use after the life of the bus or the truck is gone. And so we need to, as an industry and as a whole, start looking at that side of the business more.
Tony, that kind of brings us to your side of the business in terms of how you see the used market for ICs being affected by this transition. Will they become more valuable because there are fewer available, or will EVs actually become more valuable because that's what everybody wants and there's not enough to get? How do you see the used market transition?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a period of transition that's a little bit unpredictable, and that we won't be able to totally understand exactly what's going to happen. But Deb talked about, for instance, the California states, and we call them the CARB states, the ones that follow CARB's legislation, and that being maybe 30% of the country. I see the possibility where the market for ICE vehicles will get smaller as a result. The potential market will get smaller, but as there's less focus on producing the new products, the new trucks, and a bigger share of the new trucks coming out are going to be ZEV, EV, or whatever zero emissions propulsion there is. It's possible that ICE vehicles can even rise in value. It gets into, there was a lot of discussion here about ecosystem, and it's a big commitment for companies to make that change, and there's a lot for companies to think about. And there's always the late adopters. I'm sure there's probably people on this phone that have a BlackBerry, and I think probably for the next 15 years there's probably still going to be people driving diesel vehicles, and so I don't think diesel is going to go away. But I think that Sydney talked about batteries and Deb talked about them too. But think about the impact on the used market for batteries. So let's imagine if the forecasts are right, that a battery pack that costs $40,000 today is going to cost $20,000 in 5 years. There's a premium that customer is paying on that truck today that kind of will be it will have gone away, or, the economic value of that will have gone away in 5 years. And so that has to be considered as we're putting out residual values on the vehicles and so forth. And I think that's probably a good segue into the financing aspect of this transaction.
It is. But before, David, it's you're the next in line in the process, and Debbie said the ecosystem, the financing element or the capital piece of it is the whole ecosystem, because in this world you're not financing a transaction but a relationship.
Right.
So how do you see that?
Yeah, Jim, it's really interesting. Here at Mitsubishi HC Capital, we have a group, Mobility Solutions, that's been formed, I guess, almost 4 years now, and we saw this coming way before a lot of lenders in this space, and said, we don't know much, and we really don't have, we need to figure it out, and we need to be able to help our customers and our OEMs and our dealers figure it out as well. And so what's interesting, I've been in the commercial vehicle finance industry for a long time, and it is rare that a financing source is at the front of the table very early on in discussion around the manufacturing of a new truck. We are now having conversations with OEMs that we never heard of 3 years ago, 2 years ago. We're having conversations with OEMs we've known for 100+ years. As an independent lender, we can have these conversations with anybody and everybody that is going to find a way to deliver a electric truck of some sort or something other than an ICE truck that's going to meet the demands of their customers. They're all going to need some kind of capital to make that happen. And so we are now at the very front of the discussions going, how are we going to be able to provide a creative leasing or financing product that brings that total cost of ownership down, so all of the OEM customers can now buy or lease that truck. And some of the things that we've got on the whiteboard here, and we have a whiteboard of ideas, and all the years I've been in the financing industry, it's just, I feel like I'm with an OEM, and we remember our money is very boring. It just looks the same as it's looked for 100 years. And so we have all these creative ideas, and it is just some of the most outside the box solutions that I've ever seen from a lending source. But it is necessary. Lion Electric, Navistar, you name it, every OEM is going to need something much different than what the current product in the financing space looks like today.
David, is that I'm sorry, Debbie.
I was just going to also kind of comment on, Sydney talked about all of the consulting and how important that is. So we have customers that are coming to us where we used to finance a truck, right? But now we're looking at providing financial support for the whole ecosystem. And they're like, this is too complicated. Can you do the charging and infrastructure and handle all that for us? And so all the services and that ecosystem piece are expanding our scope. And the financial aspect is so critical to that.
Mm-hmm. So, Dave, are you looking at different uses of assets in terms of individual ownership versus shared asset ownership, or creative ways of leasing or sharing, or even subscriptions?
Nothing is off the table. Nothing. And it just can't be. I mean, you have to be open-minded to every kind of possible way to get to that monthly debt service or lease service, whatever it is, that's going to make that total cost of ownership possible. because these beautiful trucks that all these OEMs are building are not going anywhere without the capital to make it, to get it sold. So yes, it is. We are looking at some of the things that I've seen, and we have some really creative minds here about, looking at leasing battery life. It's just unbelievable things. I'm just a money guy. I've just been in the loan business for so long in the commercial vehicles. And now we're asked to look at some things totally outside. And if you're not adaptable as a lender and you're not figuring out how to be really, really, really creative, this industry from a implementation standpoint is going to be really hard to make happen without the capital.
So as part of the ecosystem, and the vehicles are great, but they don't do anything. All they are frame rails with tires until Mandar does something to them, which is also part of the ecosystem. So Mandar, how do you get into this process? You're normally, my experience has been it's a little bit you throw it over the wall and now it's your turn. But how do you get up front so you're you're in the cockpit of the airplane and not one of the passengers?
Yeah, well, first of all, to the folks out there in the cloud watching, good morning or good afternoon. We're right on that cusp of it. Could be whatever part of the day that you're in,
you are.
time zones, right? But good question, Jim. I think what's interesting is in the green room before we all came in here, we kind of were talking about it being like a bunch of baseball teams that are kind of battling it out on the field at Comerica Park. Go Tigers, right? But we're sitting in the stand. Dave and I are sitting in the stand trying to figure out when we jump in. And I think Debbie said it the best. That the I don't even know I can't remember the adjective you used to describe the change, Debbie. But I just say stratospheric change, right? There's changes in the product, there's changes in the business models, there's changes in the go-to-market channel strategies. There's changes in, the power systems, energy infrastructure. There's just a lot of change that's happening currently in terms of the chassis and where things are going. The big question we ask is, okay, what's changing in the work that the people that are using these vehicles today, right? So, I had a great conversation a couple of weeks ago over text with my friend Tony there, and Tony's like, hey, I got to get some trucks down to Florida to help clean up with the recovery efforts down at because of Hurricane Ian. And frankly, at the end of the day, those teams are using a truck. They need a body to put debris in, right? Is that going to be that's essentially going to stay the same, whether it's an electric truck, a diesel truck, a hydrogen fuel system truck, whatever it is. Then the challenge for upfitters, and I'm pretty sure with all the folks that are out in the audience, say there's a couple upfitters or peers of mine on my side of the industry. The challenge is just staying close to the OEMs to understand, what are the product parameters that we need to work with, number one. Number two, what are the go-to-market strategies that we need to work with? Because, upfitting is another level in that chain to the value chain, as Sydney described, right? How do we upfit those? How and when do we upfit those products? Mm-hmm. And then most importantly, that combination of the chassis with upfitted products, financing, infrastructure, that's all got to be there to make that vehicle work for the people that are driving it, right?
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, you're going to have, a utility company that's got to still keep the lights on. You got to have you have a telecom company that still makes sure that, internet and telecommunications are happening. You've got, municipalities and all that. So again, it's for us, for us on the upfitting side, is staying close to our OEM partners and friends, right? Understanding what those architectural / physical changes are going to happen to the vehicle, making sure that our teams are nimble enough to be able to adapt to those physical changes. But more importantly, where in the business cycle, where in the business chain do we come into play? How does that play into what Dave was mentioning about, financing and TCO and making sure that there's a value proposition that works? And, it's an exciting dynamic, exciting dynamic. I'd be lying to tell you that. I'd be lying if I didn't say it was a little scary sometimes, but hey, I think as it all comes together, working together, you know, and working together with all aspects of it is what's critically important. Communication is key, and understanding how that's all going to come together is going to be vitally essential as we get forward here.
Mandar, how do you see the change or evolution of the customer ordering process? Because it seems like one of the elements, and you know, probably Sydney sees it from her new model without dealers. The customer wants to order a particular vehicle that does what they want, but you and Debbie and Tony and Sydney have to figure out how to make it and integrate with that.
Yeah, and it's Debbie and Sydney and Tony and, you know, I mean, however many countless other pals we all have in the OEM sphere out there, right? You know, the reality of it is when people need a work truck, I like to tell people need work trucks 2 times. Number one, the current work truck they have is, I don't need my finger getting blurred here. Number one, the current work truck that they're using is dead. Okay.
Yeah.
So, second time is, hey, you know, I'm growing. I have a new contract. I have a new business adventure, or I'm growing into different areas, regions, markets, you know, and we need trucks to put workers in. You know, those are the 2 prime markets, right? So the changes in the channel, the changes in how vehicles are getting in the market over the last few years. I mean, we all know, you know, we talk to our customers on a daily basis, and they're like, we need more trucks. We need trucks on the ground. You know, I get that. I understand that. But, you know, if we move to more of a, you know, make to order type process, or if we go to leaner inventory channels and things like that, you know, we're going to have to get involved to help work with those customers on, okay, what do you want the back of that truck to look like?
Yeah.
You may have an opportunity to do a little bit more in terms of, you know, bespoke or customized type solutions for your, you know, to do your work. You know, and that in turn, if that occurs, if that happens, which we're seeing more and more of, you know, that in turn changes residuals. That in turn changes, you know, where does that truck flow to the upfitter and or the, you know, specialized equipment manufacturer, installer, and there's just a lot of dynamics that we're all trying to figure out. It's an exciting time, like I said before, very, very exciting time. But I'd be remiss to say if there weren't a lot of questions and a lot of you know, like Dave said, head scratching and whiteboarding going on to try to figure out how everybody's making it all happen. So,
well, that's right. That's where you have to start with some basic assumptions.
Yeah.
And hopefully, you know, our panel can help enlighten guests. Also, a small plug, but one of the things Work Truck Solutions is working on is to try to use the software side of the business to integrate that whole process for the customer. So the customer can see the products available, can spec the products, can get financing, can get all of that, get it all done where it's connected together, where each of the individual pieces can't connect that way. An outside software system can actually connect them. Which kind of brings me to it, between Sydney and Debbie, you've got different strategies for dealers. I'm curious, and I don't want, you don't have to go into, you know, obviously you've chosen that path, but Sydney, one of the knocks that has affected Tesla, at least, has been their ability to sustain effective service. And service, a big part of this isn't just the product. I think a big part for commercial vehicles and mobility is managing the product after it's built, and providing service and trade-in and all of that. Right now, your volume, it's probably manageable, but if you're successful, and I don't know what your long-term goal is, and you're selling 300,000 units a year, I don't know what you think it's going to happen. Do you see your dealer body growing, or are you satisfied with the system that you have now? I think you have like 8 or 9 service centers.
Yeah, we do. We currently have 9 experience centers throughout the United States. We also do have a partnership if a customer is interested in purchasing and they're not located near an experience center. We do have a partnership with Cox, so utilizing, you know, third-party service networks. But I actually see our business model really staying where we are direct to consumer. There are certain markets where we absolutely have to have a dealership because of the laws in those states. But from our perspective, especially because we're only in the EV business, these have much lower maintenance service needs after they're delivered, our trucks. And so actually, we think that those dealer networks, would not really be feasible for us because we're not going to need that much service. We would rather invest our time and energy in mobile service and having techs in the field go to our fleet customers. For those that have their own technicians, really investing in the training of their shop and their technicians internally, and being more agile and mobile and coming to the customers versus the customer having to bring, their truck out of service, out of their fleet, downtime, loss of money. We're really going more of a mobile route.
Interesting. Well, I don't know, Debbie, what is your, do you, not without plans, but I mean, how do you see a differentiation?
We still see our dealers as part of the value proposition that we bring to the industry, that having all those rooftops and will allow us to provide the best customer experience possible. So it's a completely different approach than Lion. With that being said, the idea of mobile maintenance and some of those things that Sydney mentioned is certainly things that we are exploring as you look at this, because when a truck goes down, if you can get to that customer, that may be the most effective way as opposed to bringing the truck back.
That's true. And it's also, it is a business to business relationship, which it'll be interesting to see. I'm old, obviously, and so I get frustrated when I am dealing with an internet company and there's no human being. All you do is you get referred to another website or something. But I think young people probably like that. They don't like communicating with it. So we'll have to see what happens. So one more question, Debbie, just as a perspective, we talked about EV. What about other forms of electrification, hybrid, or even as Mandar said, getting into hydrogen?
So hybrid is definitely not something that we're looking at. My engineering friends will say you have the worst of both worlds because you have to do an internal combustion engine and a battery system. Certainly fuel cells, when we look at Class 8 long haul, we believe that there's a viability there. But even in our long-term kind of forecasting and modeling, we think that eventually goes away as battery technology and power density and things improve. So there is a window where we believe it's useful. So we will be coming out with a fuel cell in a few years.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the density, but this brings for everybody here this idea of the infrastructure. That's it's one of the elephants that when I talk to folks in the EV transition, it's going to come. Will it? Do you as an OE, between you and with Lion, are you building out infrastructure? One of the things that helped Tesla succeed is they invested in and built their own infrastructure, and they own it. So public chargers have sort of a speckled success rate in terms of performance and uptime and quality. What do you think the infrastructure forecast is going to be, and how will that impact your ability to sell your product?
So I'll say for where we are right now on buses and medium duty trucks, we don't see that as a huge need. It really, most of those are going to come home and charge at their home site, right?
I see. Yeah.
When you get to Class 8 and on a highway, that's where it's going to become more important. I will say that doesn't say that we don't need commercial chargers. I will say range anxiety is real, and knowing that there's a charger down the street in case something happens and my day doesn't turn out to be the way I thought. I was caught in traffic or whatever that is. I think it's important that we have it, but I don't think for bus and medium duty products that it's going to be critical to the success. When we get to Class 8, I think that's where things tip. I don't know if Sydney has different perspective.
Yeah, we haven't invested directly in installing our own charging infrastructure. However, as I mentioned, with this whole ecosystem piece, we have an entire division within Lion called Lion Energy. So we stock and wholesale and have partnerships with a number of the EV charging companies and manufacturers out there. So we wholesale, but then we also offer all the consultation that's needed with our fleet customers to come in and understand their current locations, what their needs are, understand route optimization, what types of chargers they really truly need. We don't want to sell them or suggest something that they don't need that's overpowered for based on what their actual fleet is performing on a daily basis. But I believe that it's going to be a huge piece to adoption. We also have an internal PR and relations team that's really going out and talking at the legislative level to policymakers, lawmakers. And one thing that they continue to ask me is, how can we help support? And I always just say, please ask from not only obviously the grants and incentives on the actual product, but we need a bigger push on the actual infrastructure. Really making sure that fleets are getting grants and have available money, but also that states and cities are investing in their public charging infrastructure, because it is an ecosystem. Even though we're talking about commercial vehicles in this entire process, the reality is in terms for EVs to truly adopt, it has to be on the consumer retail level, commercial business level. It is an entire shift in the way that we are looking at vehicles in the market entirely.
I think it's a really interesting conversation because there's a couple points I think I'm just sitting here kind of thinking about as you guys bring it up. I think Debbie's right. I mean, if a vehicle is going to be domiciled, yeah, but again, even if it's a school bus being domiciled, you're going to have a local district school depot that's going to need 50 chargers, right? Which makes sense. Sydney, you're talking about you might not get into, the different OEM, you might not get into the charging situation or all that kind of stuff, but, other OEMs are, and, but the interesting point you brought up, Sydney, is mobile service, right? I mean, you guys don't have the brick and mortar footprint that, you don't have the brick and mortar footprint maybe that Navistar has or some of the other OEMs, but you're taking on the model that some of the, and I would call them the retail EV guys are taking on, which is go to the vehicle to service it, right? So you think about all that. I think one thing is the vocational side of all those pieces, right? Installing the chargers, going and servicing the vehicles, if we need to go build a new power plant, all that kind of stuff. For a very long time, there's going to be, in my view, and then I think in a lot of the industries, there's going to be a lot of IC stuff supporting that, right? So, it's going to be important that support side of it to get to this new realm of EV, and what that means is going to be a very interesting interesting and dynamic period for folks like us, folks like Dave, that we're going to have to balance multiple models of how that's going to happen, right? The standard vocational type truck, whether it's a utility truck that's going out to put in a new power line to something, or a service truck for a Lion or a Navistar or any of the other brands that are doing mobile service is still going to rely upon old school for a little bit, and then at some point when range and flexibility and all that stuff gets taken care of, then we'll start seeing some transition over to the new energy side of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. But it's dynamic. It is really, 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 really dynamic on what's going on there, and this. Again, that whole change that Debbie mentioned when she kicked it off of the whole, and I use the word stratospheric. I think it's pretty amazing when you get the six of us sitting here talking about it. You start putting the pieces together and you go, good. It's a big piece of meat we all got to figure out, And it's gonna be challenging. You know, we're talking to companies like, you know, Lion, and we're talking to companies like, you know, some of the charging infrastructure guys, and they're like, hey, we've got to install X number of chargers, or we need a fleet of Y number of service vehicles to service our aspirations of where we want to be in the market. And you know, that's a big deal, because you know, as we see as you see those changes happening, you know, the amount of investment that the OEMs are making in expanding, I would say, IC/traditional truck capacity. You know, it's an interesting read if you start seeing where the money's going at the OEMs on where they're investing and how they're doing it, and you know, the need for those vehicles is going to continue to increase, because not only you're supporting the existing situation of transportation, but you're also creating a new world of transportation.
You're right. It's a big bet. But, you know, the other side of that is we need a perspective of the global transition.
Sure.
And if you look at what's happening in China, Asia, and Europe.
Yeah. And there's a lot of press recently about, you know, with China and what they're doing with, you know, electric trucks from a freight perspective. There's a lot of discussion on, you know, how's that going to influence the rest of the world, right? And you know, frankly, you know, I know you keep saying, Jim, you're an old guy, but you've seen it all. I mean, you've been there. You know what's happening. I mean, you understand the transition of the global perspective, given your history, and you know, it's really amazing to understand, like, you know, what's happening in other parts of the world, how that is now greatly influencing what's happening in the U.S. market, or vice versa. You know, it's a new reality. And like I said, it's exciting to be in the fans watching. We'll jump in and figure it out as you guys tell us what your trucks are going to look like. But it's
so. Tony, maybe Tony, this is a good chance for you. We're sort of getting into the back nine of our panel, which is too bad. We could do this all day long. This is so fascinating to understand what you all think. But if you're watching, if you could put your feet in the shoes of the audience, Tony, what would you do or suggest strategically? How do you go forward? What should we do now?
Well, I would say, first of all, Jim, Mandar was talking about how early you witnessed all the you know, the change in the industry. I was wondering if do you remember when they invented the wheel?
I remember, you know, it was really funny because it really improved the economy. The horses could go more than 3 miles.
All right. Well,
but
I'll redirect, and basically, so I think kind of the summary of what I've heard here, and I think some of our corporate philosophy on this whole change is that customers, like, we're at the precipice of like a whole ecosystem that's changing. The current ecosystem for internal combustion engines grew up over about a century. And when people buy such a vehicle today, they don't have to even think about it. You know, I have people at my used truck centers asking, well, are we going to make investments in charging for our used truck centers and things like that? I don't think we will, but nobody has had to ask a question like that for probably 50 or 60 years about, you know, what are we going to do? So I think it boils down to, we're going to be asked by customers for total transportation solutions and not just for a product anymore. And it's going to require partnering. I mean, I'm going to have to partner more with Deb and her team on the truck transaction. Deb and her team's going to have to partner with others on charging and financing and all these other things. So it's just, I think the customer's expectation now is going to be, give me a solution. I don't really know how all of this is going to play out, and you guys are the experts. And so I think that's what we're going to have to do.
That's you're helping us try to figure out where you can spot the trends. Maybe Dave, you can help too. What do you suggest? How can we identify some of these trends and start making some bets as dealers, as suppliers, as manufacturing partners, and even you for your competitors. What's your suggestion and advice?
To act now, act yesterday. You know, the longer you wait, it's going to be problematic. You know, we are talking to dealers every day about financing that charging station, that infrastructure at the dealership. And, you know, those that are out in front of it are like, okay, yeah, we get this. Let's go. I want to beat the guy across the street, because I know if I have charging stations here and the other 5 that are within 3 blocks from me that don't, I know I'm going to get the EV customers. I want to be first. Those other 5 dealers that don't have the charge, don't have any plans, or we go in and we have the same conversations with them, and they look at us like deer in the headlights. They're not interested. And I said, well, if you were interested, it would take about a year. Right now, if you decide to commit to building your charging infrastructure, you're not going to get your chargers in the ground and ready to plug in for about a year.
Yeah.
So the longer you wait, that's just going to be pushed out. So
that's right. That's true. So, Debbie, what would your advice be?
Yeah,
How can I see it?
Yeah, I think I'm on Dave's page that regardless of where you are at the beginning of this journey or in the middle, you know, we have customers at all levels of sophistication, but it's coming. And the earlier that you start to engage and understand what is changing, the better off you will be. Doesn't mean that you have to buy a truck tomorrow or start investing in charging stations, but you need to educate yourself on what the future looks like.
No. How about you, Sydney?
Yeah, I think that there is obviously going to be a new shift in new sources of revenue. So for the dealers that are on the line and the OEM side, we are seeing that our revenue is shifting more towards pre-sale versus post-sale as more customers go electric. I think that's a really important piece that and OEMs need to start understanding and really get familiarize themselves with all of the different options that are available and come up with creative solutions. I think we'll see a huge revolution and emerging trends of like pay per mile models versus traditional financing, leasing, where we are. And so that's where, you know, all the people on this panel really come together, because it's, okay, how do we, as an OEM, what does that look like, right? Like, I'm going to work with Dave on creative solutions for customers, but then also bringing in the upfitting to those costs for our customers, charging infrastructure, all of these different pieces that they need, and then providing one price to them in a pay-per model or even subscription-based. I just think the days of customers being able to finance, you know, in a huge chunk are over. That we're looking at. We need to look at different creative ways to help them.
Well, I love your perspective. That's the brave new world.
Yeah, it is.
Mandar, what's your 1 minute quickly of what's your advice and how do we proceed in the ecosystem?
I would tell all my OEM friends out there, keep us in the loop, because, you know, again, we are the frosting on the cake to help make that vehicle that you produce work for the eventual end customer. So keep us in the loop on what's going on with product, what's going on with business, and you know, channel structures. And, you know, if you see things changing on where we have to get involved as a body manufacturer or a vehicle modifier, then let us be part of the solution rather than you know, the throw over the wall perspective, which, you know, it really that's not necessarily the most efficient way to get things done, is throwing it over the wall. But, you know, we just need to be aware of what's happening, and that's happening. You know, finally, let's realize that the infrastructure is something that's going to have to be evolved over time. And, you know, as those evolutionary changes happen, you know, we need to support the folks out there on the infrastructure side as well. So a lot of interesting times, great discussion, and you know, we'll figure it out. We'll get there. Our business, what I mean by our business environment, meaning the commercial vehicle, vocational work truck environment, we're pretty resilient. And as we get through these changes, the decades and centuries that we've been in business with all of our companies, or for a few years as I look at Sydney. But in all honesty, I mean, we can figure it out. We can make the changes happen, and we'll all be successful in the end. We're not going to let it fail. That's for sure. So,
and having people like you all sharing and be generous, involved and sharp, and talking to each other and being part of this process, that's what gives me the confidence. Look at your companies and how you've evolved over the time, from 1908 with Navistar and 1646 for Mitsubishi and the 1800s with wagons. I mean, so that you remake yourself. So my advice has always been to our folks that you do what you do best every day, and look at your customer, drive the solutions to your customer's desire and exceed their expectations. And if you do that, your customers will help spot the trends as they go forward. You be the glove on the hand of the customer, and at the end of the day, you'll be successful. We're going to have tomorrow. We're going to have a session like this, but with dealers. So we're going to translate now what's going at this level of decision. We're going to be translating it from the dealer's perspective, and I hope you can join us. I thank Work Truck Solutions for making this possible. But more than that, our panelists, this has just been marvelous. I hate to see it end. I wish you the best as we go through, and maybe we'll be able to check in and see how things are going at the next summit. This is a great panel. Thank you all very, very much. It's been a great pleasure, and we will be talking to you tomorrow at the summit with the dealers.